Lauren. Welcome everyone to a Voice of the Customer session again. So excited to have today for you Samson from Coca-Cola. I think you're going to learn some great things. Quick agenda covering right now. I'm just going to go through a few tidbits about what's going on in the market today with companies like Coca-Cola. Take a look at what your peers are doing. Then Sam's going to go through an overview of the customer solution. He's going to talk about the on-the-shelf availability process itself and what that means to Coca-Cola and what they were trying to solve. And then next he'll go into how he solved it with Alteryx. And then of course we'll close and go into Q&A. So be ready with your questions. All right. So what's happening today with supply chain and companies like Coke, right? Look, Industry 4.0 has accelerated due to COVID pandemic, and organizations which already had been investing in digital transformation just plainly fared better than others who did not. In fact, according to a McKinsey study comparing the current crisis to the last recession, which was during 2007 to 2009, the study showed that 1,000 companies fared better than others and actually showed 150% TRS growth over that period of 2007 to 2009. And why? Well, because they had focused on building on an operational excellence. And Coca-Cola today, just of July 21st, reported a 41-cent increase in shares. That's momentous, especially through the crisis that we faced. And so what are the differences here? Well, one of the major barriers to gaining operational excellence is the systematic use of analytics. And subsequently, in an additional study from McKinsey, it shows that one of the major stumbling blocks is the current skill sets of the workforce. From the assembly line to the managerial positions, everyone is affected and will require some kind of upskilling to support that kind of a digital transformation, that transformation to that Industry 4.0. But last but not least, looking for efficiencies and gaining operational excellence is just simply not enough. Another key difference between the organization who fared better and were successful in continuing to increase their TRS during the last recession and now through the pandemic is innovation. Organizations need to see digital transformation as a vehicle to drive profits through innovation and speed. And so let's take a look at that, take a look at the supply chain. The supply chain ecosystem is pretty complex. It has various different functions that exist in different departments and often belong to different infrastructures. And building resiliency for many of these organizations, right, is really a challenge. First, you got to drive speed. And for many organizations, running supply chain reports can be daunting. The high volume of data often being transacted can slow down the reporting itself, prompting most organizations to run reporting conservatively. Two, you want to have some transparency. As the supply chain touches so many lines of business, most organizations struggle with the data silos. To build transparencies, organizations need to tackle their data first. Having the capability to blend, clean, and build a data source that is complete and truthful and represents the business model, and which can be shared across multiple departments, is the first step to building that transparency. Next is granularity. Insights into the supply chain can only be had once you understand drivers that can affect the supply chain itself. These drivers sometimes are internal conditions and some are external conditions, which sometimes can be sudden events. The ability not only to use external data, but also build granularity through predictive analytics can help an organization play out various scenarios to begin to understand risk mitigation and surely adaptation. Last, automation. So many of the supply chain functions are still, unfortunately, mostly manual processes today. Many supply chain analysts and business users are still relying on manual analysis, either by using a spreadsheet or updating data manually in a supply chain management system. And so let's talk about this analytic process automation. Analytic process automation enables the convergence of data, process, and people through a human-centered approach. APA brings data from all kinds of sources, whether you're ERP, individual spreadsheets, data from other organizations, web data, demographics, and even spatial data, and makes it accessible to all. APA allows manual process currently being done in spreadsheets to be easily moved into Designer and automated. In addition, APA provides a guide to begin incorporating more advanced processes, such as predictive analytics in a self-service code-free environment. And lastly, APA, through the self-service human-centered design, increases the perpetual upskilling of people and accelerates the adoption of analytics through the democratization of analytics. And so if I can just take you through just a moment, APA enables you to know more, to mitigate uncertainty, and be ready to adapt. So let's tell you a story. Imagine, if you will, for a monthly SNOP meeting where your senior vice president of SNOP has asked you to deliver various scenarios for 10 different regions, depending on either sales increases or between 3 to 6%. Depending on COVID hotspots and mobility data. For how many of you would this mean weeks of preparing data and trying to build models in Excel, only to be asked during the meeting to add yet another variance? This is where APA comes in. It allows you to know more and be ready faster. Many of you understand that most of your data comes from a variety of different SCM systems and ERP systems, anything from even Excel spreadsheets. The ability to bring in all of these sources into your analytics process, the ability to blend the data, clean it, wrangle it, prepare it for analytics, build reporting, and add additional functions, even such as predictive, prescriptive, spatial data, and then output that data back into either an SCM system or bring it into a BI tool to share with other key stakeholders, or a visualization tool. That is what the APA platform provides to you today. It's that flexibility. And today, to ask about more and to find out more about how the APA platform can work for you, I'm going to be joined by Sam to talk about exactly how Coca-Cola is using APA.
Thanks, AQ. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. So just want to give you guys a little look into a project I've been working on. This is a development project for me to get a little bit better insight into the specific group at Coke, while also being able to deliver value with my skill set and my experience in Alteryx. So the Customer Solutions Group at Coca-Cola is a unique group that supports the commercial, retail sales, supply chain, and franchise bottlers. Their main objective is to ensure that the right product is at the right place at the right time. The team also functions as a switchboard for new initiatives with our customers, such as promos, innovation SKU launches, and they're aware of most of the service tickets that are submitted by the customer. And in this group, the Customer Solutions Director is the lead contact with that customer team. So the main goal, another goal for this team is to increase sales or market share with the customer. And for this specific project, I was working with a North American large store retailer. So with our large store retailers, we're always looking to have the smoothest receiving process for the customers' associates and our bottler associates in the sales, distribution, and merchandising teams, while also ensuring that all products, new or sustaining, are in stock in the back room or on the shelves. Some of the processes that we've already put in place are ASNs and network exchange receiving. But one of our largest challenges is keeping our product in stock, because this affects Coke's ability to sell in promotions and innovation SKUs for the following year. This is something that the customers team has provided to us called on-shelf availability. So this specific large store retailer has instituted a process many of their stores where an associate is sent out to the floor 3 times a day at 9 a.m., 2 p.m., and 7 p.m. to scan all of the holes on the shelves. And with this data, they would send it back to their vendors to try to improve our metrics. So the large store retailer will send the flat file to each of their vendors with those scan holes by store location, SKU, and time of day. There's many reasons why a shelf is empty at those times. It could be due to sales or just missing the merchandising times. But with a week's worth of data, and some knowledge from the supply chain about pre-existing constraints, the customer solutions team can identify SKUs for the bottler account developer to order at his next in-store visit. So the previous process that was led by the customer solutions director was pretty manual. As I mentioned, the large store retailer would send an Excel file that was basically a copied and pasted pivot table to our customer solutions director, as well as the bottler who's responsible for delivering the and selling that account. And the Excel file would be sent with the previous day's scan holes. Then the customer solutions director would spend around 5 hours a week formatting the data from our customers' naming and number conventions to Coke's naming and number conventions so that they could eventually be uploaded into the account developer's handheld. During that process, every week, the customer solutions director would aggregate the previous week's worth of flat files and put together a top 5 opportunity SKUs by store so that they could be uploaded to the bottler's handheld. And so the next time that the account developer entered the store, they would get an alert that they would have to close out, right? And it would tell them the top 5 out of stocks for the previous week. So this would allow the account developer to focus more so on selling and coordinating new promotions and innovation SKUs with our customers, and less of a focus on trying to track down, out of stock SKUs or, out of stock SKUs, sorry. So this was taking my partner in customer solutions about 5 hours a week of just manual data manipulation. So when I took over this project, my main goal was to automate this process as much as I could. I couldn't really affect any of the upstream impacts, so how the large store retailers sent those files, but I could try to automate all the stuff in between while also automating the Excel spreadsheet creation to send to the bottler system admin to upload to the account developer's handhelds. So some of the steps I took was to create direct data linkages with our material master and outlet master so that process of formatting the customers' naming conventions to our bottlers and our customer solution team's naming conventions to be facilitated. So here I have a couple of screenshots of my workflow. One of the growth behaviors at Coke is about taking an iterative approach. So I applied this towards this project. So the first version that I kind of published, version 1.1, was successful but very clunky. Some of the clunkiness with this version was I would manually link each of those daily Excel files, run the workflow, and they would be stored or housed in an Access database. And then at the end of the week, I would run this workflow to get the weekly file to send to the bottler system admin. This process still only took about 5-10 minutes out of the week, so a huge reduction in time from 5 hours, but I knew that there was more I could automate, especially with the input files and the output file creation. So with version 1.3, some of the enhancements that I added was I utilized a couple of macros. One of them was a crew macro to help me process all the daily Excel files that are being dropped into a folder on our shared drive. And then I also utilized a batch macro to create weekly output files. And then another thing I did was convert the Access database to an Alteryx database, so I don't have to worry about file size limit, and it would be a little bit faster running through the workflow. So all of this automation on the input and output side of the workflows actually enabled me to publish this workflow on our Alteryx gallery so that our customer solutions director could run the report independently of me. So lastly, some of the facts that came out, or the outcomes of this project, was that out of stocks were reduced at locations with this process versus without by not 39%. And you can see from those charts that the out of stocks the reduction in out of stocks were evenly dispersed amongst the time of day that the customer's associates were going out and scanning holes on the shelves, as well as across the week. And then lastly, the money slide right. It also led to a 5% increase in sales versus those locations that did not have this process. And then with the automation that I provided and in this process, it frees up 5 hours a week, or 20 hours a month for this customer solutions director to focus on other more pressing matters and less data manipulation and formatting, right? But that's all I had. Pretty quick run through of my automated workflow and try to help facilitate this process that was already in place. So I'll open up for any questions.
Great. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Anquilyn. There's a few questions. One of them is for Anquilyn. It's, how can I get started with Alteryx? Am I able to start small and scale?
Oh, absolutely. I think if you're taking a look right now as how do I get started with all of this, right? Look, start small. First of all, if you're not an Alteryx user today, definitely download our 30-day trial. That will help you greatly. We also have a discovery program, which is part of the perpetual training and upskilling that is available today. Please check it out. This will get you started. And I think the best way to get started right now is to take a look at some of the traditional reports that you are doing and identifying which one of these reports right now just manually just takes a lot of your time because of a lot of the pulling of the various different bits of data and data prepping and wrangling necessary, which has to be manually updated. And again, if you're bringing in any other third-party data from the outside, let's just say you are taking and paying attention to, for example, COVID closures, you're trying to bring that in, or unemployment data or anything like that. It just gets even more complicated and even more manual for you. So take a look at that first, right? What really right now is a major pain point just takes a long time. Start there. Start taking a look at how to bring that data into Alteryx, clean it up, get it cleaned up, and then take whatever you're doing in your Excel spreadsheet, decompose it, and start building it inside Alteryx, and just to see just how much faster that is. Bring the automation component, and very much like Sam did, share it on our gallery just to make it available to your stakeholders who can quickly grab it and run it as an ad hoc report when they need it. So that's the first step. And then as you start getting more comfortable with processes and taking these processes into the system, guess what happens? Like Sam said, you start getting more time, right, available to start really working on some of the higher value use cases that your organization is potentially asking you about. Now you can start really working on looking at forecasting, demand shaping, demand forecasting, and automating some of that through the system and working into composition of AI, ML, and prescriptive. And those are the things that you can move to very quickly. You can start incorporating spatial analytics, for example. All these things can be had. But you're right, you start first with the basics, and that is putting in some of the traditional things you're doing today and releasing some of that time for yourself.
Wonderful. We have another question from the audience. I went back to the workflow. This is for Sam. Can you just talk again briefly about the way you color-coded your workflow, like the yellow boxes, the orange boxes, and what each of them categories means?
Sure thing. So the color code, basically I try to keep all input data the same color. And anytime I have a portion of, or some of the tools creating an output file, I would put them in that purple. So all the linkages, the input is in yellow, and then a lot of the outputs are in purple. And then the other color boxes that are in between are some of the more kind of manual data crunching and formatting and manipulation. So the two kind of larger boxes you see, part 1 and part 2, so part 1 was to process the daily files, and part 2 was to create the weekly handheld files to email out to the bottler system admin. But I like to use tool containers because it helps kind of organize my thoughts. It also makes it a little bit easier for the documentation process. My very first workflows look like a bunch of toolboxes stuck in the middle of a bowl of spaghetti. But, as I try to hand off those workflows or onboard new associates and try to teach them about Alteryx, I find it much easier to organize them this way. It makes that handoff go a lot smoother. And, selfishly, fewer questions back towards me.
Great. Thank you, Sam. Another question for you. Are you able to measure customer sentiment analysis through this workflow so you can see which products consumers are more likely to buy from Coca-Cola?
So unfortunately, the file that we're getting is purely just on scan holes at those stores. I'm sure we have access to some of that data out there, but for this specific project, we didn't have that available.
Got it. Thank you. Another question for Sam. Has the solution you shared been deployed to all Coca-Cola bottlers?
Nope, this was focused mainly on this one large store retailer. And so we're trying to get that set up, and then hopefully, more and more large store retailers kind of bring on. We can onboard more and more retailers. One of the nice things about this retailer was their scan hole process was something that they had started initially. And so we were kind of on the downstream end of it, right? They would send us this file and say, hey, make your numbers look better for us.
Great. Thanks, Sam. There are some more questions coming in for Sam. Did you work alone on this workflow, or did you work in a team? And do you have recommendations on how to progress with Alteryx?
Yep. So I've been fortunate enough to be working with Alteryx since 2017. But I'll say a lot of my a lot of the knowledge that I've gained has just been trying something out, seeing an error, going on the Alteryx community site, trying to find the same error and seeing what solutions that people had posted. But yeah, I did work on this workflow by myself. But like I said, I kind of had a leg up having some Alteryx experience over the past few years. But, I would just say don't be too scared of Alteryx. It's kind of like Excel in that, you know, some of the easy things are really quick and easy to pick up, and those tools become, you know, part of your tool set that you pull out. You know, I'll use the same 5 to 7 tools, but as your problem statement starts becoming bigger or you try to add in more automation, you'll find yourself looking at some of the other tool sets that are involved, that are offered. So, you know, like the macros, I hadn't ever touched a macro until this year, 2020. So that was about 2 years of just kind of basic input, output, joins, selects, formulas, and then as I try to put in more and more automation, I was able to look into those macros. The documentation language gets a little bit easier to read the more kind of familiarity you have with Alteryx. And then, you know, lastly, I had a lot of good help from someone on our team who had been using Alteryx about a year or two before me. And so when I had some questions, I could always go to him. But for the most part, I try to do this as independently as I could.
Hey, Sam, it's AQ. Just to follow on a question about this. Do you find that a lot of the blocks that you, like if you take a look at some of the blocks that you've built, whether the yellow blocks for data input or the output blocks, do you find that you sort of almost reuse them into other projects that you go into?
Yep, that's one of the nice things about the container tool is if you have a set of inputs or outputs that can be utilized in multiple processes, then you know you can just open up another workflow, copy that container box, and then paste it into the other one. So when I have similar problem statements, I do try to recycle as much as I can.
Great. That's all the questions we had for today. A few people were asking about the recording, and this session was recorded, and everyone will receive an email with the recording on Friday. So I want to thank Sam and Anne-Colin for their participation in our live Voice of the Customer event today. And I want to thank everyone in the audience for joining. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.